Ladies and gentlemen, imagine the wind howling through your bones, rain hammering against weather-worn glass, shadows dancing at the edge of your vision. Now, picture a solitary beacon perched on a jagged coastline, centuries old, its light slicing through the misty gloom, promising safety and guiding ships away from death. And then, imagine that guiding light faltering, flickering, or worse, becoming a beacon of unspeakable dread. Tonight, I invite you to step into that world, into 3 true lighthouse horror stories that defy explanation, that erode rational certainty, and that chill the heart even beyond the crashing surf. Let us begin at the Outer Hebrides, Scotland, on the small island of Flannan, also known as Eilean Mòr, a remote rock in the North Atlantic. In December of 1900, the 3 lighthouse keepers vanished without a trace. The station was found in eerie disarray, meals left uneaten upon tables, oilskins strewn about as if abandoned in haste, the beds unmade, and the lamp fully stocked. Only one of the men's watches lay broken, its hand stopped at 12:25. The sea was calm, the light dark. A storm had supposedly battered the island days earlier, but when relief personnel arrived on December 26th, they noticed something far more unsettling. Railings had been washed away, and a set of oilskins was missing, though no body was ever found. Not afloat, not crashed upon the rocks. No forced entry, no sign of foul play. A lone log entry noted nothing unusual. And yet, 3 men had vanished into thin air, as if swallowed by the very air and water that surrounded them. Some say they were carried away in a freak wave. Others whisper of something more malevolent, luring them into the darkness. Others still talk of phantom ships and spectral voices. The fact remains, no bodies, no goodbye, only the still fresh smell of breakfast left to grow cold in the lighthouse kitchen, and 3 empty beds, and 3 empty places in history, gone in an instant, swallowed by silence, and still unexplained. Our second tale transports us across the Atlantic to the Greystone Lighthouse on the windswept shores of Maine, in the United States. It was the 1930s, and a young keeper, his name long forgotten, was stationed at the isolated outpost, tending the lamp night after night. He spoke quietly in letters of hearing footsteps on the spiral staircase, though no one else was present, of seeing dark shapes in the glass panes, as though shadows walked just out of focus behind the lantern room. One evening, he awoke to the sound of someone sobbing in the dim corridors, though he was alone. When he finally traced the sound, he discovered nothing but water dripping through a crack in the wall, and yet a sense of sorrow so vivid it stuck to his skin. He reported the lamp flickering, not with wind or rain, but as though someone with trembling hands were blowing out the flame. On the worst night, he awoke to a shadow standing before him in the beam of the lamp, featureless, dark, and still. He could see only the silhouette of a man, staring back at him, then gone the moment he blinked. In his letters home, he asked to be relieved, citing fatigue and nightmares, but in the official log, his entry for that night reads simply, "Lamp flickered, all normal, nothing to report." He declared he'd heard creaking footsteps after midnight, the whisper of breath, the cold pressure of a presence behind him on the stairs. His last letter reads, "I think someone died here. I'm afraid something died here, and it may not be at rest." He walked off the property soon after. No one saw him again. The station sat empty until it was automated decades later. And local fishermen swear now that on fog, thick nights, you can hear weeping in the walls and someone pacing up the stairs, where no one walks, where no one has lived or died, but where something or someone still waits. And then we come to our third tale, dark and unyielding, off the coast of Japan. It's set in the very recent past, though whispers of it linger like salt in the mist. On a tiny islet, a set of twin lights, modern, powerful, automated, guarded a shipping lane. The engineers who visited the site to service the lamp spoke of a pervasive stillness, as if the island itself held its breath. One night, a junior engineer's flashlight flickered. For a moment, he saw something move behind the light's beam, a figure hunched over, thin as driftwood, long hair hanging wet across its face. The engineer froze, terrified, then blinked, and the figure was gone. He rushed to the next station, a dingy shed with monitors. Reviewing the recordings, he saw something even more haunting. Just before the figure appeared, the light's sensors had registered a presence, like a cold person, and the beam dimmed, not because of a malfunction, but as if it were reacting. But the video shows no person, only the light bending, the formulas glitching, the sensor straining. The entire station powered down for a moment, as though refusing to fully illuminate. The engineer refused to go back and declined to detail what he saw. When the senior crew arrived, they found all the lights blinking in sequence, alternately bright and dark, as though breathing. The quiet island listened. No footprints in the moist granite. No footprints in the sand. Yet something had been there. And though the technicians tried to explain it, faulty wiring, sensor glitch, atmospheric interference, none of the logs match what the engineer reported. He insisted in private. "It watched me. It knew I saw." And though he left the service quietly, he said later he could never forget the sense of wrongness, of something living just beyond understanding, and even the bright light of logic could not dispel it. In each of these three tales, Eilean Mòr, Maine, and Japan, there is something the rational mind cannot easily dismiss. Missing men, night-haunted footsteps, unexplainable sensor readings, the flicker of something that should not be. Each lighthouse stands alone, a solitary sentinel, raising its beam into watery darkness, trying to keep peril at bay. But sometimes the true threat lies within, not a ship's rocks or a storm's fury, but something older, something we cannot control, something that feels as though it has been waiting for centuries in the folds of oilskins or behind the glare of a modern lamp. And yet, it is not the absence of light that terrifies so much as the threat of the unknown. The first story is terrifying because the men vanished. They might still be out there, trapped, or perhaps transformed. A wave still carries away not only bodies, but identities. In the main tale, the sorrowful presence, footsteps, the unrecorded lamp flicker, there is a sense that grief, isolation, and something unquiet collided in that narrow spiral of stairs, and no amount of logic washes clean the stain left by that hollow weeping in a room no living soul occupied at that hour. And in Japan, we confront the binary rattle of sensors, of lights that flicker with deliberate timing, as though the mechanics themselves are possessed of intent. The natural laws bend around an uncanny presence, and even as we electrify our beacons, the darkness around them grows more hungry, pulls closer. The emotional core of each story is the keepers, the men who lived their days in quiet routines, who cleaned lenses and trimmed wicks, who ensured that ships saw home. They were practical, methodical, and ordinary in every way. And yet, they encountered something that stopped them at their core. To think that a man who polished glass by lamplight might be unmade by a whisper in the walls, a shadow by the stairs, or a phantom glow on a remote sensor, it confronts us with the terrible fragility of all we claim to understand. Friends, what do these horror stories leave us with? They leave us with the knowledge that isolation warps perception, that solitude opens cracks in reality where impossible things can seep through. They leave us with a visceral reminder that the modern world may outpace superstition, but it cannot escape the unknown. They leave us with the sense that lighthouses, and perhaps we ourselves, though proud and resolute, are always vulnerable to interruptions of sanity, to intrusions that come softly, without explanation, but become impossible to ignore. On the storm-raked crags of Scotland, in the whispering beams of Maine, and among the unblinking sensors off Japan's coasts, horror is not dressed in robes or crowned under lightning. It is quiet. It is patient. It is the hush that follows a lamp going out, the emptiness of an unmade bed, the stranger in the glass, the flicker that cannot be accounted for. It asks us not to look away and not to be certain, and to feel both dread and compassion for those who stood watch and found themselves staring not into the safety of the light, but into the darkness that waits beyond it, into the awful question, who, or what, watches back? As you return to your lives, think of these lighthouses, not as distant curiosities, but as mirrors of our own vulnerabilities. Because though the keepers vanish in legend, the silence remains. And in that silence, something waits, something that might just be listening.